This is a kit lens, one of the most universally hated lenses in the world. These plastic little blighters have littered every corner of the globe, and that's because anytime someone buys an entry-level camera of some definition, you often get one of these thrown in as a bundle. The only problem is, it's not exactly a bundle of joy. After using one of these things even for the shortest period of time, the most rational response for most people is to immediately go out and buy a prime lens and throw this one in the bin. With a build quality that is as plastic and cheap as a Gee Whiz, optics that are as sharp as a butter knife, and distortion that makes that world-bending scene from Inception look perfectly normal, you have a lens that is the polar opposite of greatness. However, despite all of that, and granted some exaggeration for dramatic purposes, a kit lens isn't actually all that bad. I have shot with one of these things on multiple different occasions, and I have been able to capture some brilliant street photography with it. And I have actually spoken about kit lenses before on the channel, but it was a few years ago, and please don't watch that video. It is quite cringy, but depending on who you speak to, you might actually think that this video is quite cringy. But the difference is, I have some sound advice I'd like to share with you on how you can get the most out of a kit lens, especially if you're a beginner photographer and this is the only lens you have. This video is going to focus a lot more towards street photography, however a lot of what I'm saying is applicable to other applications of photography too. Kicking things off with the build quality, and this is universal for any kit lens. They are cheaply made from plastics. You drop one, it will probably break immediately, but they are small, light and compact. Three key attributes many people look for in the lens for street photography. A kit lens especially has a magical ability of making you look like a tourist, so I've been able to utilize that and get much closer to subjects without them actually realizing, because my setup is so small and compact. Plus, it's less intimidating. The biggest misconception is that image quality for the kit lens is trash, and that's straight up not the case. Is it the sharpest lens out there? Absolutely not. Is it going to give you some chromatic aberration? Sure. And is there going to be some lens distortion? Yeah. But I find you only really start to notice those things when you begin to pixel peep. For the most part, it really doesn't matter, and most people aren't going to be able to tell. I mean, on a recent trip down in London, I used this kit lens in conjunction with an A6000, and I was able to use that setup to capture some brilliant street photos. And I guaranteed if I posted some of these on Instagram, you wouldn't be able to tell it was taken with a kit lens. And again, street photography isn't all about image quality and having the sharpest image edge to edge, and the same can also be said about Aperture as well. There is a misconception that because a kit lens has a variable aperture, you can't take good photos with it, but that is so far removed from the truth. But before we discuss that any further, for those unfamiliar, a variable aperture means when you zoom in with the lens, your minimum aperture will become narrower, letting less light in, and will create a larger depth of field. And when you do the reverse, the opposite happens. More light is let in, and less shallow your depth of field becomes. And this is actually a key reason why I think a kit lens is a good choice for someone just starting out in photography, especially street photography, because a kit lens forces you to shoot at more narrow aperture values. I think it's safe to say that when you start out in photography, you naturally want to shoot at faster aperture values and create images with the most blurry backgrounds known to humankind. I know this from personal experience, because when I upgraded from a kit lens to a prime lens, from then on most of my images were shot at like an f1.8 aperture, regardless of the scene or subject. And when I started street photography, I continued this same approach. Go out onto the street, shoot some people, that sounds really bad out of context, shoot some people with a camera at the fastest aperture possible, blur the heck out of the background, and call it a day. I nearly had the police calling me there. That was a close call. And it was only after some time that I started to realise that this wasn't the best approach for my street photography, because a lot of my images started to look same-ish, and you lost any form of context of when or where a photograph was taken. And in fact, some of my street photography can't really be called street photography. In fact, it's more like street portraiture because of this approach I was taking. And I'll even go as far to say that a lot of my street photography, if we can call it that, was complementing more of the technical qualities of a lens. Don't get me wrong, there are moments in street photography where using wider, faster apertures is better as opposed to more narrow ones, but it should depend on the scene, the framing, the lighting, and the subject you're trying to capture. And on reflection a bit further, my old approach of giving every single photograph that bokeh-licious treatment meant I was neglecting a lot of what street photography is all about, telling stories and capturing decisive moments. If you take a look at some street photos captured by some of the most renowned street photographers, you'll start noticing some trends. A lot of these photos are captured with a narrower aperture. The subject is in focus and you can see what's going on in the background, giving these photos good context. Look a bit closer and sometimes you'll clearly see that these street photos are not the most optically sharp photographs, and they probably haven't been shot on the latest and greatest camera or lens at the current time. But that doesn't matter, because what all these photographs have in common is a story. For different reasons, each of these images I have shown you evoke a feeling from us, the viewer. And what we can all collectively learn from these impeccable photos captured by some of the most renowned street photographers is what's more important than the lens is the composition, the subject, the lighting, the story, and the feeling a particular image may evoke from a viewer. And when you actively start to practice and work on these things, over time you are going to notice huge improvements within your own work, and before you know it, you're taking good photos with a kit lens. You can actually safely say that when it comes to street photography, gear doesn't always matter. And here are some techniques that you can start implementing into your own work right now to make some huge improvements with your own street photography. One of the biggest benefits that all kit lenses share is they all have a versatile set of focal lengths. So this Sony 16-50 covers everything from wide to telephoto. And what this can teach a beginner photographer is how different focal lengths can change the final look of their image. And a good discipline I'd encourage anybody to try out is to shoot with your kit lens as if it was a prime lens. So what I mean by this is take a separate photo walk around your local town or city at these following focal length. 16mm, which is a good focal length to focus on taking pictures in small or tight areas and capturing wide angled shots. 23mm is also capturing at cityscape shots and brilliant for street photography. It is wide enough for most scenes, but if you are too far away from your subject, you can always take a step closer. 30mm, which is actually currently one of my favorite focal lengths on APS-C cameras because it closely mimics what we see with a human eye, so it has a very flattering and natural looking field of view. 35mm has many of the same qualities as 30mm, it's just a tad more zoomed in, so again, great for street photography. And then finally, 50mm, which is a great focal length for tighter compositions while still capturing a relatively natural perspective. Definitely a good focal length for focusing on individual details or subjects within a frame. Now, if you decide to try out this suggested approach yourself, you're going to achieve two things. The first is creativity. When you use a zoom lens, it's really easy to see a subject and just zoom with the lens to capture the shot. And whilst there is nothing wrong with that, what I find a fixed focal length does is teaches you to think more about your framing and the subject you're trying to capture. So now, rather than zooming with the lens, you are zooming with your feet. You are moving backwards and forwards and thinking a lot more critically about your composition and the story you're trying to tell. The other great thing you're going to achieve from repeating this process is figuring out what focal lengths you prefer personally shooting with. So if you decide later down the line that you have saved some money and you are ready to upgrade from a kit lens to a prime lens, you are going to have a better understanding of what prime lens is going to best suit your needs, and you're not going to accidentally waste your money buying the wrong lens. Plus, this technique I think removes some of the common frustrations around variable apertures. Because you're not using your kit lens as a zoom, whatever focal length you are shooting at, that is going to determine what your minimum f-stop value is going to be, and it's not going to be constantly changing up or down. A kit lens, I think, might just be one of the most important lenses you'll ever own. What a lens like this is going to do is teach you a lot about the basics and the fundamentals of photography. And hands down, the best way of improving your own photography is by practice. Getting out onto streets, taking some photos, pushing yourself out your comfort zone, and repeating this process. Practice makes progress, and eventually, I guarantee you'll start seeing improvements within your own work. And one final bit of advice from me today is don't allow a kit lens to limit your own creativity. Alright, that is all I've got for today's video. I do hope this has been an extremely insightful and helpful video. If it has, hit the like button, it'd be really appreciated. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, please do that as well. It'd be great to have you on board of this ever so growing community. And if you do have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Oh, got to shift over for this. Now, before you click off today's video, if you want to see how I set up any of my cameras for street photography, then definitely check out this top video right here. Or if you'd like to see the POV that I shot down in London with the Sony A6000 and the kit lens, then definitely check out this bottom video right here. But with all that said and done, until next time, create, explore, and inspire.